And I think it's important to look at the history of manufacturing, because during the turn of the century there was this guy, his name was Henry Ford. And Ford was the father of mass production, and he turned his attention to building cars, and he came up with this pretty nifty vehicle. It's called the T Ford, Model T Ford. And the strange thing about Ford was that he said to everyone who came into his showroom, you can have any color car you want providing it is black. And guess what? Ford never turned in a bad sheet. Every quarter he was making money. Now, during the early days, you could say that corporations and consumers did not have an equal relationship. That is to say that corporations always held the upper hand. And the reason for that was because they had a monopoly over ideas. And if not ideas, they had the whole idea of economy of scale, which they could use to bend the minds of consumers. So in the case of Ford, I mean, if you look at him, he controlled everything. Not only steel mills, but the whole idea of engine block building, the whole idea of prototyping, the whole idea of even the paint industry. Everything was controlled by Ford. And what we see is very reminiscent of past governments that used to control so many things. But I think with the whole idea of globalization, what has occurred is that not only has places like Singapore gone through huge remodeling in terms of how corporations should set their whole idea of best practices, but you could say that as we marinate and go deeper in the whole idea of globalization, we become so inextricably linked to that idea that it's no longer possible for us to say, well, we may decide to buy into this idea, but we don't wish to buy into that idea. And I think this is one of the problems that we face in the whole idea of globalization. Because not only do we take in new ideas, but sometimes those ideas that we take in are not perhaps ideas that are very good. They are not very good because the whole idea of globalization, for lack of a better word, simply means one size fits all. And I don't believe that to be the case. I don't believe that what works in, let's say, Tibet or Mongolia will necessarily work in Singapore and vice versa. I don't buy into the idea. And what we saw in the marketing manifesto was actually a slow progression whereby consumers began to grow aware, or they became conscious of their power. And when that happened, you found that corporations no longer could afford to stick to the mantra of you can have any color of car you want providing it is black. Now that whole idea gave way to the concept of customization, the whole idea that customer is king. Right? Now, if you take this idea and superimpose it on, let's say, the problems that the PAP faces with the current electorate, then you will discover that it's a one-to-one supposition. That is to say that many of the problems that the PAP has is indicative of what actually transpired once upon a time between corporations and individuals. And what we may be seeing right now, unbeknown to even the PAP or even ourselves, is the idea that there is a shift of power from governments to people. And that shift of power can be due to the internet, like I said, but I think it has more to do with the whole idea of how we process information. And most importantly, what type of information we would like to prioritize. And because of the whole idea of globalization, choice is endless. We can customize our values in life in such a way whereby we could literally take information or knowledge or even wisdom from any part of this planet and weave it into our character. That is how internationalized we are without us really knowing it. And I don't think you really realize it till you go back to the pre-internet age, where everybody looked the same and they behaved the same, they talked the same. And the reason for that was because they had only access to probably one stream of media, and more importantly, that media was usually controlled by the state. But today, with the whole idea of the internet, the whole idea of the government controlling individuals, it's not only passé, but there is no way in which it can work any longer. So what you have is a growing electorate that is gradually realizing its power to choose, its power to exercise and its free will, and most importantly, the power to prosecute on what they believe to be true or false. And this is a great power, I think, that most electorates are fast realizing. They may not even consciously know it, because that's the nature of power and how it changes a person. But trust me when I tell you that this shift of power is real, and this is a big challenge for a party hegemony like the PAP, because I really don't see how they can resolve that problem without seriously looking at the whole idea of whether they should consider the question of reinvention not as a matter of choice, but one of necessity if they want to remain in power.